What's up folks, CrushSG here, and apparently I left out an entire build option from my Razor series. Well, of course I did. I didn't know the build existed till a couple of days ago. Anyway, this video won't be so much of a guide, but more of an early showcase and build discussion. I need to do a lot more testing before I can give this build the usual CrushSG guide treatment. Okay, quick story time. After posting part 2 of my Razor guide, I was having a chat with a buddy of mine about builds and such. The conversation eventually shifted to Razor and whether an Electro Charge build was truly viable. After some theory crafting, I decided to put my Fischl's 4-piece Thundering Fury set on Razor just to get a feel of the baseline damage of Electro Charged. Now at this point, the fact that Fischl's goblet was an Electro goblet didn't even occur to me as a factor. I was merely testing Electro Charge damage anyway, so the goblet wouldn't have mattered. Well, as it turned out, within the first couple of minutes of testing, I realized that I was critting for 14k tapping E and over 20k holding it, completely unbuffed. With 4-piece Thundering Fury reducing the cooldown of Razor's E skill every time Razor sets off a reaction, I was able to pull off taps about every 3 seconds or holds about every 5 seconds. Now that's a lot of damage, folks. So needless to say, I ended up spending the next couple of hours not testing Electro Charged, but conducting a full Electro build test instead. Serious talk though, that floor 12 clear in the teaser I posted was completely unplanned. That's the reason why I didn't have a pyro on the team to begin with. I simply wanted to beat stuff up in chamber 1 to test the build and ended up clearing all 3 chambers without a pyro. However, I'm not so sure it would have worked if my Razor team was on the second half rather than the first. Second halves of floor 12 tend to be a little harder. I also haven't done any of my usual number crunching, so I don't know which build actually does more damage. Physical or Electro? It feels like Electro does more at the moment, but it could just be the excitement clouding my judgment. Anyway, let's talk about the build and how it works. The key to the build, of course, is the Thundering Fury 4-piece bonus. In fact, it is this set that makes or breaks the entire build. Without it, Razor just doesn't put out enough Electro damage to be worth the investment into full Electro. So maybe it's more appropriate to call this a Thundering Fury Razor build instead. Anyway, the 4-piece bonus reduces the cooldown of Razor's E skill by 1 second every time Razor triggers an Electro-based reaction, and it can occur once every 0.8 seconds. This naturally requires you to have supports that enable Razor to proc as many reactions as possible. The type of reaction doesn't matter as long as it's Electro Charge, Overloaded or Superconduct, i.e. an Electro-based reaction. Potential teammates off the top of my head are Xiangling, Diona, Xingqiu, Mona, Qiqi, and to a lesser extent maybe Klee. These characters all have skills that persist on the field or on Razor himself, dealing consistent pyro, cryo or hydro damage. Now you could simply just focus on buffing the damage on Razor and using reactions only for cooldown reduction. The huge increase in Electro damage output opens up the avenue for using an Anemo character with 4-piece Viridescent. With the right setup, good micromanagement, you could have both Superconduct and the Viridescent debuff up almost all the time and have constant Electro Charge procs almost every hit. Adding 40% resist reduction to the already large hits on this 3-day-old unoptimized build, who knows, Razor could be dropping 40k AoE bombs every 5 seconds if I get him built properly. I did however say it requires good micromanagement, and that's something I really don't have. There's a reason I don't run any swirl comps. My fingers are just too retarded for that kind of high level gameplay. But nevertheless, if have spare resources, we'll try one day. On the other hand, this also opens up the option of capitalizing on these reactions for more damage. Now I didn't get to test Overloaded or Superconduct all that much for damage output, but I did do a couple of test hits just to get some baseline numbers, and I deal 977 damage per Superconduct, 2.3k twice with Electro Charged, and just over 3k with Overloaded. Now this is all with 91 EM, so there is most definitely plenty of room for improvement. Now the EM formula is very complicated, non-linear and not completely known. So I had to do some guesswork, but by my estimates, we could see Electro Charge procs in the realm of 3.2k with a level 80 Rain Slasher on my level 90 Razor. This goes up to about 4.3k if we gave up a timepiece artifact for an EM one. And of course if we had a C6 Diona we get 200 more EM, bringing the damage up to about 5.7k. Now that's an interesting thought. Keeping in mind, with Razor as the trigger, you'll get 2 hits of Electro charge per trigger. The damage adds up quite nicely, on paper at least. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the build showcase, folks, but before we wrap things up, let's talk about some key thoughts and considerations about the build. First, this build doesn't really shift the damage equation all that drastically for Razor. It's not like he did 75% physical damage before and does 75% electro damage now. No, it's probably closer to 50-50 or at most 60-40 in full electro. My early conclusion here is that a full physical build deals more consistent damage and has a more straightforward, simple playstyle. Full electro gives you more bursty damage and requires a fair bit more attention and user input. Next, full electro raises some interesting questions about stat priorities. Without doing any hard math yet, just based on gut feeling, my working theory for now is that percent attack could be better than electro damage on the goblet specifically for this build. The logic here is that Razor does a large amount of both physical and electro damage in this build, so a single stat that buffs both damage sources simultaneously could be better than a stat that provides a larger buff, but to only one source. Nonetheless, I'll have proper math sometime down the road. Now on the reaction front, there is the question of whether it is worth giving up percent attack on the timepiece to stack more EM, and likewise giving up more damage-oriented secondary bonuses from other claymores for the EM on the range slasher. And of course, is it worth a C6 Diona? Well, I guess the Diona part is more of a question of budget, but it's interesting that this build is giving me the opportunity to explore a non-amplifying elemental reaction instead of the usual melt and vaporize affair. And lastly, like any element-heavy build, there are limitations to this build that are less impactful to a full physical Razor build. Domain debuffs and Abyss buffs are one example because they could make one element completely overpowered while completely punishing another element. Another example is slime mobs, which can be resistant or completely immune to electro damage in some cases. Alright folks, this brings us to the end of my Thundering Fury build showcase. Yes, I have indeed decided to call it that, it just makes more sense. I will continue my tests on this build to fully understand and optimize it, and will provide an update on it sometime down the road, maybe in a full guide format. I'm also working on other videos at the moment of course, but for now, as always, thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't, share my videos with your friends, crush that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.